All righty, guys. We're going to introduce you guys, welcome you guys to a little conversation called Talking Texas History. My name is Chris Parr. Mr. Parr, I'm a fourth grade teacher at Greenspray Elementary.
My name is CJ Hoblich. I'm a seventh grade Texas history teacher at Welborn Middle School.
I am Charlie Matzig. I am a Texas history teacher at AMCMS.
Well, we all know that Texas history and history in general is a lot more fun when it's a conversation instead of just having to read something. And so the three of us wanted to get together and start a little something called Talking Texas History with you guys to share with y'all out, help you out with the week through the weeks while we're at home. And our first topic that we're going to be discussing is the Comanche people, basically, and their effect on the people in the Great Plains and into Texas and into our closer to the present day to the recent European explorers and the colonists. So what we wanted to start off with was a little background about the Comanche people. The Comanche people started off, they didn't even start in Texas. They actually were a branch, what we think is a branch of the Shoshone tribe up in kind of in the Dakotas area. And they were nomadic peoples. And you guys, in case you don't know what nomads are people that follow their food. They don't have a home, a permanent house where they live. They, if they're actually in my class, we have a little saying we do is I'll say, food go that way, me go that way. And that's what nomads mean. That's how we remember it. And so there may be a couple times here today where you hear me say that. And that's kind of what the nomadic people did. They followed their food. And the Comanche people, their main source of food initially were what the large mammal that was running around on the plains was the buffalo or the bison. And they followed it around wherever it went. They had teepees. You're familiar probably with the term teepee, which their homes were, it was kind of like a makeshift tent.
Mr. Parr, is that what I can't buy at HEB right now? TP? Is that what we're talking about?
TP, yes. That kind of TP is a little different. They used a little bit of different. They didn't really have the cloth TP like we had, but these TPs are TIPI. It's a tent. Yeah, I like that. That was really good. But these teepees that they had was their home, basically. They could set up and break down, and they'd follow the bison. They were hunter-gatherers. They would gather berries, gather nuts, gather fruits, gather roots. And that was honestly, most of the time, they would eat the stuff they could gather. When they could find large game, that's when they set up camp for a little while. They might kill several bison, and that's where you hang out for a few days. They didn't have fridges like we do now, though. So definitely the meat didn't last quite as long as we had now. They had to dry it. They had to salt it. Actually it was more dehydrate, dry it, like kind of make jerky, but they didn't eat fresh. And so wherever they went, wherever the bison went, wherever the buffalo went, food go that way, me go that way. And that's kind of what they did. And so, and initially they traveled on foot. That's what they had. They had to walk around. It was probably hard you couldn't catch up with a bison when it was running. You had to either scatter the herd and drive some of them towards where you were, things like that, or scope them out. And actually even some of them, they just would even run them off cliffs, things like that too. But it was pretty hard to catch them. And so that's why most of their diet initially consisted of fruits, nuts, berries, grains, things like that. And they traveled along the plains. Go ahead.
One of my favorite dishes that they created out of those exact items that you're talking about, the fruits, the nuts, the meat and stuff like that, was called pemmican. And it was dried meat that was mixed with fruits, whatever kind of wild fruits they could find, and animal fats. And they'd kind of make a mixture, and they kind of mix all that stuff up together. And they would keep that with them as they were moving from place to place. And it sounds not as appetizing as maybe you would want it to sound. But the great thing about it, it was super high in calories. So you could eat a little bit and it would get you going a long ways. It'd give you enough energy to get through the day. And that was one of the main things they would keep with them as they traveled from place to place in search of food. Not only does it allow them to stretch their food source a little bit longer for a greater amount of time, but it gives them that high caloric intake that they need because they're constantly in motion. They're constantly moving from place to place. And if you've ever gone outside and run around for a long period of time, you're tired at the end of the day. Imagine doing that every single day, day after day after day. You're going to be tired. You're going to be physically exhausted. So they needed a lot of calories, a lot of high caloric intake just to keep their lifestyle up at that point in time.
Is that similar to the pemmican?
Yeah. There's a pemmican beef jerky that I guess you can still buy in the stores.
Yeah.
seen it in a while, but I've often wondered, like, would pemmican come out with a flavor that tastes like actual pemmican, like actual animal fat and berries and meat mixed together? I don't think it would sell too well. I'd
Probably
like to.
not.
Would you try it?
Yeah.
Raise your hand if
Oh,
you try
definitely try it. This figure didn't make itself. I'm a calorie dense diet guy.
Yes, I'm drinking the Comanche's favorite beverage, root beer, as we speak. Also high in calories.
Is it pemmican flavored?
I wish it was.
All right,
one thing
guys.
about the
All right,
Comanches.
guys.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, did you know that the Comanches' quick rise to power as a dominant Native American group came largely in part because of, what do you think? Any guesses? Not Mr. Parr, not because of
No. Look at my shirt. A Mustang, the green spray, the Mustang, huh?
Very good. The horse, right?
Oh, that's
The
a beautiful
horse.
picture of a horse you got there, Mr. Matzing.
Yes, my 5-year-old drew the body of the horse, and then my 8-year-old son drew the head of a dog. So
nice.
This is a horse.
It looks like Godzilla's body and like a puppy dog's head is what it looks like. Very.
Oh.
It's fierce, I'm sure.
Yes.
So tell me about the Mustang. And where'd they come from? How'd they get them?
All right. Before the Comanche came to Texas, the Comanche were just another small hunter-gatherer group. Like you mentioned above, it was a nomadic group that migrated constantly for food, which we just talked about, and because they were pushed out of the land by other Native American groups because they weren't very strong. It wasn't until the late 1600s, about 1680, when they happened upon Spanish Mustangs or wild horses, that basically changed their culture entirely, guys. They quickly became skilled horsemen, helping them to become great buffalo hunters and feared warriors on the plains of Texas. From when they were just little boys, even younger than 5 years old, they were given bows and arrows to learn to shoot from the top of the horse, so they could become masters at hunting the buffalo.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine
one of the things I've learned about them is they were a lot of even military folks closer into modern times refer to the Comanche as the finest cavalry, which were horseback soldiers of all time. They were the finest cavalry fighters of probably around the world.
And one thing I'd like to interject here is that it wasn't just the men who were taught to ride the horses. The women were taught to ride as well. The entire culture of the Comanches was built on the horse after they discovered the Mustang.
Right. Could you imagine your 5-year-olds riding a horse, shooting a bow and arrow, learning all that? I mean, I'm afraid to get on top of a horse.
Well, I can imagine my 6-year-old doing it, but I also imagine him flying off of said horse and then tumbling and rolling and then wanting to do it again. So you might
just stick to drawing horses because we're good at that, right?
That works. I think that works better.
All right. So these riding skills, gentlemen, also help them to perfect lightning-quick raids of other Native American and European settlements. The Comanche would ride into these settlements using the light from the Comanche Moon. Coach Hoblet, can you tell me a little bit about what the Comanche Moon is?
Absolutely. So back in the time before we had electrical light where we can see at nighttime and things like that, the Comanche would have to rely on the moon to provide them light. And so when the moon was full, the Comanches would raid different Native American villages. They would raid different Texan villages, different Mexican villages, and they would rely on the light of the full moon to provide them the light source to which they could see where they were going. So they could see where they were going at night. They could ride.
I think Mr. Matzig right now is modeling for us the Comanche Moon.
Yes. Look down, because I'm down there. Nope, I'm straight down, right, Coach Parr?
Yes.
Yeah, there's the moon. Do you see the moon?
I see the moon, and the moon sees me. Yes. But anyway, they would use the light of the moon to provide them the light source for their raids, and it became a fearsome time for pretty much anybody living in the area where the Comanche could raid. So anytime the moon was full, people would refer to it as the Comanche Moon because that meant that bad things were probably fixing to happen.
So that's when you stayed up late at night.
Right.
Yeah. You were like somebody was out the window. Somebody's always looking.
It was never good. Yeah.
So it gave them enough light to see what they were doing and just enough darkness to remain invisible to others, right? So then they could raid and take horses, clothes, weapons, tools, and anything else that they needed.
And even people.
Even people. And then they would eventually ransom those people back, right?
Yeah, quite a bit of ransoming. A lot of their economy, like for lack of a better term, was based on kidnapping and then ransoming people. They would go to other Native American groups or even other Spanish missions, Spanish settlements, and they would actually just raid in, kidnap as many people, steal horses, everything they could, and then the next week or two they would go to, for lack of a better term, market, and bring all their people that they kidnapped and say, all right, who wants to barter to get your person, who wants to buy your family member back? It's going to cost you this much money. And people, that's just what people did. People expected that.
And their favorite type of people to kidnap were typically children between the ages of 3 and 10 or 3 and 12. And the reason they chose those specific ages is because if you were younger than 3 years old, you probably weren't old enough to take care of yourself. You couldn't wipe your own bottom and feed yourself and do all the necessary things that the adults don't really want to mess with all the time. And if you were too old, you had probably gotten too accustomed to your current way of life. You were too much like your mom and dad, who were maybe German or Scots-Irish, things like that. You kind of already built your culture. But if you're in that age range of 3 to 10, 3 to 12, the Comanches felt they could either kidnap you and ransom you back for a high price, or they would keep you and make you a Comanche yourself. And so
one lady that comes to mind is Cynthia Ann Parker, right?
Absolutely. She was 9 years old when she was captured by the Comanche, a prime age range. And so the idea was, in the Comanche culture, since the Comanche's lifestyle was built around warfare and hunting, there was a high mortality rate, meaning that many Comanche men passed away either in hunting buffalo, which was a very dangerous pastime, or in warfare, fighting against other people. And the women did not have a high birth rate. They weren't able to give birth to a lot of babies every year due to the nomadic way of life, moving constantly on horseback. It just didn't make it easy to have babies a lot. So the Comanches' number were typically low. They didn't have a whole lot of Comanches. So they would kidnap these people to bring them into the Comanche group, the Comanche culture, and make their numbers increase. They could keep
raise them as Comanche. And that's, they would come in. That's what they did. Like wherever the Comanche came, they'd take over. You basically kind of, hey, we're going to kidnap you. You become part of us, or what happens?
You're going to die.
You're gonna die.
Guess what else changed other than them getting horses? Their name. Okay, their name even changed. They didn't even call themselves the Comanche because of their warrior-like culture, and because they became so dominant at horsemanship. They became feared by others, and so they actually referred to themselves as, and I'm going to butcher this name, the Numunu. Okay. And that means the people. They call themselves the people.
The people. That's right.
It wasn't until other Native American groups started fearing them whenever they became more dominant, and they called them a Ute word, Comanche, which the Spanish kind of changed it up to Comanche. I'm not sure what the Ute word was, but it sounds kind of like that.
The Ute word was Comancia or Comanche.
Okay.
Which meant anyone who wants to fight me all the time.
Right.
Yeah, well, great. Yeah. And the Comanche referred to themselves as the Numina, meaning the
Numina. Yeah, Numina. Yeah, it meant, like what you just said, those who want to fight me all the time. It also meant those who are against all of us, or simply enemy. Okay. Yeah. So all in all, the Comanche became arguably the most dominant Native American group in Texas, due largely because of their horsemanship skills.
That's right. They were able to come in. Now, guys, I'm hating to be the bearer of bad news, but we're kind of coming close on our time here. We got about a minute left before we reach our 15 minutes. And I want to really tag on what Mr. Matzig said there. Most powerful group in around the Southern Plains.
Yeah. So let's talk about why the Comanches go from being the most powerful group of Native Americans in the Southern Plains, and what many historians argue the North American continent, to slowly but surely disappearing. We don't see a whole lot of Comanche people around today. So as we've mentioned before, the one biggest source of food and materials and economy in the Comanche culture was the buffalo. The buffalo was everything in the Comanche culture. And so they relied on the buffalo as a source of food, source of shelter, source of clothing, source of tools and weapons, all sorts of things. So the Comanche had been victorious against just about every single other group they had come up against. The Spanish could not stop them. The French were afraid of them. The Mexicans tried to bring in Anglo-American settlers from the United States to build a blockade or a barrier between the Comanche and the Mexican settlements. the Texans did their very best to try to subdue the Comanches, but could just, at best, keep them at arm's distance, keep them away. It wasn't until the Americans move in, after Texas becomes part of the United States in 1845, the American government rolls in and basically goes to war against many different Native American groups, the Comanche included, to try to subdue them, to try to move them out of the way so they could open up the western frontier for American settlement. They could have American farmers and ranchers moving into the lands that was owned by the Comanche, called the Comancheria. It was an area of about 250,000 square miles large. They wanted to open that up to American settlement. So they—
The northern part of Texas.
Yes, yeah. Panhandle region up Lubbock, Amarillo, back that way into New Mexico, Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, areas like that. So the American military—
Far south is Abilene area into there, or not quite that far south?
Some people would say it
Present day Old San Antonio Road across Texas, right? North of that.
Okay.
Yes, north of that. You would even say that maybe modern day Austin would be the far southern limits of the Comancheria, because when President Mirabeau Lamar moved the capital out to Austin, people thought he was crazy because he was on the edge of Comancheria.
Yeah. Fredericksburg, Kerrville, all that was still in the middle of it.
All that, yes. So the United States Army, who was being led by two major generals, one was William Tecumseh Sherman and Philip Sheridan, they start to kind of hatch a plan as to how they're going to defeat the Comanche. And the big answer they come up with is, if there's no more buffalo, there's no more Comanche. So we don't have to fight the Comanche per se. Let's wipe out the buffalo.
Yeah.
And
those Comanche are tough. They fight back. Those buffalo are dumb. We shoot them. The one standing right next to them just looks and then just keeps eating and doesn't really do anything. So let's go after the easy thing.
That's exactly right.
And it goes back to Mr. Parr's saying, what was it? There's my food.
Go that way?
You go to food, right?
Me go that way, yeah.
Yeah.
So all this is kind of taking place at the same time the Industrial Revolution is going on in America, where people are moving from doing jobs with muscle power and animal power to using machine power, to using machines, building factories, building railroads, things like that. And so one of the big selling items at this point in time was buffalo hides. Every buffalo hide was selling for $3.50, which was a huge chunk of change in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. And so these buffalo hunters are more or less invited out onto the Southern Plains to shoot as many buffalo as they can. And they're getting $3.50 per buffalo hide that they send back east.
Was there a season? They could only do it in a certain season like deer, or no?
As far as I know,
it was just
they just sent them out there. Yeah,
they would shoot from the trains. They would shoot from
So we're going to see the buffalo more or less wiped off the face of the earth. The numbers I saw earlier, between 1868 and 1881, we have something like 31 million buffalo that are going to be exterminated by buffalo hunters. They had buffalo hunters who were so prolific, who were so good at their job. One guy shot 35,000 buffalo in 28 days, something like that.
Could you imagine being a Comanche, one of the Comanches, just seeing this happen, seeing your way of life being demolished? I mean, that's just a crazy thought to put in your mind. Back then, that's your way of life. You used pretty much every part of that buffalo, and you just see piles of, just.
And all they're taking is the skin. All they're taking is the skin of it, and leaving the rest of it there to rot. So do you think are you going to want to talk with these people nicely? Are you going to want to come to the table and say, hey, let's be friends?
And so, as a matter of fact, one of the greatest battles in Comanche history was the Second Battle of Adobe Walls, where the Comanches, led by probably the greatest and the last Comanche chief, Quanah Parker, son of Cynthia Ann Parker,
who we mentioned earlier. Yes.
Yeah.
He's going to lead
a fight to try to exterminate the buffalo hunters. And unfortunately for him and for the Comanches, it doesn't work out. The powerful rifles that the buffalo hunters were using and the powerful weaponry of the American army are just too much, and the Comanches can't overpower them. They eventually have to pull back. And so all of this kind of comes to a conclusion in what were called the Red River Wars, where pursuing the Comanches, they tracked them down to Palo Duro Canyon, which was like a Comanche hideout, Comanche base, I guess you could say. They tracked them down to Palo Duro Canyon. They trapped the Comanches there. They've already wiped out majority of the buffalo. What was the last thing the Comanches had left that they depended on for their way of life? The horse. And so they pin up all the Comanche horses, and the order is given to execute the horses, to exterminate the horses. So they wipe out the Comanche horses.
So they wanted them out of there. They wanted them out. Drive them out.
So eventually, a short time later, within about a year or so, Quanah Parker, the last great Comanche chief, has to lead his people into the military bases there in Texas, and he has to surrender. He has to say, I can't do this anymore. My people are starving. The buffalo are gone. We don't have the horses to keep up our way of life. We can't do this any longer. And so that's the last great Comanche resistance. And ultimately, that's kind of how the Comanche come to an end. But the big thing I want to point out is it's not that they were defeated in battle necessarily. Not that they lost wars against the Spanish or the Mexicans or the Texans or the Americans. It's that their way of life was basically crushed. Their source of food and tools and weaponry, things like the buffalo, was exterminated. The horses were wiped out. They had no other way to keep on living the culture they had known for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yeah. The biggest, baddest guys in the plains, and they weren't defeated. It's their way of life was ended.
Yes.
They weren't able to hunt the bison.
They pretty much could have won any battle that they encountered. It's when your way of life's taken away from you, it's mentally, exhausting as well.
Yeah. Eventually you just have to give up. You just have to go, my people are starving. That's the quote, isn't it? From Quanah Parker, my people are starving.
Yes.
And that's what they finally said, we've got to give up. So we wanted to talk with you guys. I don't know if there's anything else, any other ahas or any big points you guys had to share about the Comanche folks.
They were awesome. I love the Comanche. I mean, they were overwhelming odds, overwhelming weaponry. They had every disadvantage, yet they still managed to find a way to be the group, group of Native Americans for a long time. There's something to be said there.
And one of the things that on that note, we talk about the 6 flags over Texas, and the 6 flags over Texas is the 6 countries that have controlled all or part of the land that we now call Texas. We've got those 6 countries that are involved there, and I honestly think we've left. There should be 7. That we should have the 7th flag over Texas, which these Comanche people that nobody could defeat. No, they actually ran Texas, this huge area of Texas, more than anyone else, and people didn't go mess with them. If you went to mess with a Comanche, you came back with your tail between your legs if you had your tail at all.
Right. I mean, there was a dividing line in Texas. Like, you don't go past this invisible line.
Yeah, because that's where the Comanche were, and you just left them be. So they're definitely a great culture. It's really sad the way that they just were wiped out, completely wiped out. There's definitely a lot of differences. Knowing what we know now, if we knew that, we know now what we knew then. Things probably could have been done a little bit differently, for sure. But we wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about the Comanche people, share what we know about it, share our passion for a little bit, this little window of Texas that we have. We'd like to have some more conversations in the coming weeks. But thank you for joining on us. We really appreciate it. This is Mr. Parr telling you guys, stay strong.
This is me raising the roof, guys. Raising the roof.
Keep your fingers out of your head holes.
Yeah. Here you go.
All righty, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Bye.